Okay, let's welcome all of you now to our third and final end of the season podcast. This feels a bit like a sweatshop today. As with the other two podcasts, I'm joined by Dave Barton and James Miller. These are my guests for this evening. Welcome to you.
Cheers. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks again for being guests. In this last of the three end of season podcasts, we're going to finish off reviewing the rest of the players on their performance for the season. And again, to clarify our player selection, it's alphabetical and only those who have played more than 5 matches are included. These podcasts will cover from Field right the way through to Roberts. We'll also be ranking the managers in this one. The rankings will be given out of 10. So an average would be 5 and a perfect one, obviously 10, which we won't dwell on too long. Without further ado, onto this final tranche of players. And Sam Field, my player of the year, and many others' choices too. He's a great defensive midfielder, but he's also capable of covering, as we found out, left back, left wing back, and doesn't do too bad up front either. His work rate is fantastic, and it's now no surprise to see him turn up anywhere on the pitch. You just don't know where to expect him. So I've given him an 8, and I think it's deserved. James, what about you?
I went with a 7, and
I
thought no one deserves more than a 7 this season. And we all have short memories, but there was a few months, January, February, where he was having a few rough moments as well. I remember there was a match at Hull where he was putting in a few weak challenges that led to goals. He wasn't quite on it as much as he has been the rest of the season. Started the season well. I felt like he ended the season well, but he still wasn't quite as on it in the middle. So yeah, I went with a 7. But I wish we had a team of Sam Fields like everybody else. He's a great player, great asset for the club. But yeah, just this season, no one's getting more than a 7. And it's only going to go downhill from here.
Dave, what about you?
Yeah, I went 7 as well. Similar, really. I think he's had a good season. He's been our player of the year by a mile, really, hasn't he? I thought he'd done a good job when he went to centre half in the Watford game. He's always been good in midfield for us. I'd like to see him add a few more goals to his game. So he got an important one at Burnley at the end of the season, but that's something I think he can improve on. But we're a much better team when he's playing. He's had very little to work with in midfield. He's had to do the running of about 3 other players at times. He's a key player for us. I hope we can keep hold of him for next year.
Yes, it's a good point. We may well lose him. He has really advertised how good he is. Or to put it another way, all the other players have made him stand out. Okay, Tim Iroegbunam. He's only a young lad, as I keep being told all the time. And like Drew and Sinclair, still has a lot to learn, especially in terms of tracking back with players and defending. However, it's obvious that the lad has real talent, and he would be worth keeping if Man United agreed. I've given him a 5. Dave?
Yeah, I went with 5 as well. He's done okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually have missed him when he hasn't played recently. He does have a bit. He's very good with running with the ball. He can get up the pitch. He scored a few goals towards the end of the season. My concern with him is his best performance and his worst. There's a massive gap between them. There's no in between with him. He's either pretty good or he's absolutely awful. Doesn't seem to be an in between there. He's another one. I mean, we've signed him on loan for a season. He's not going to be here next year, is he? You wonder, could we have maybe given our own players more of a chance this year? But then most of them were injured, wouldn't they? But just looking at him as his performances, he's done reasonably well, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right though in what you were saying, that when he's had these off performances, it really shows. And I think that's probably why he's been hooked so many times, and replaced by someone. James, what do you think?
I actually gave him a 6. I was quite impressed with him for the most part across the season. I think he was just slightly above average. I know he had a lot of bad performances as well, but he's got so much talent, like both said. His passing does leave a lot to be desired at times. It can be quite lazy and he gives it away. But when he has his strong performances and he starts driving forward, driving past people, he drops the shoulder and powers in, especially he was doing it in the first few months of the season, you could see why he could go to the top level. But I can't see him coming back. I can't see Aston Villa loaning him to Gareth Ainsworth teams. Can you? That's going to be the problem, because what was he touching the ball? What was it? He touched it 7 times in one of the last few matches or something. It's not going to happen, is it? And that's the shame.
No. Funny enough, we're talking about a budding youngster like that who's got great potential, which brings us around to Johansen. Dave, what your thoughts on Johansen?
I went with a 4 for Johansen. It's such a shame with Johansen. When he signed, like after the loan spell, I was so excited by that signing. I thought this is the one that's gonna get us up. He's, really exciting player. He's a good general midfield, but it's just been so poor. And I was quite hopeful when he come back from injuries, around February, March time, that he'd kick on and get us out of trouble. But he's a bit like a donor. His legs have completely gone. He's passing shots to pieces. He can't get around the pitch anymore. It's quite sad to watch, really. And I can't believe we've got another year on these contracts. Seems like another bit of a mistake that they've made there. So, maybe they'll move him on in the summer. But it's been a poor season from him, really, hasn't it?
Yeah. James, same?
Yeah, I went with a 4. Yeah, I nearly gave him a 3, but then I looked back and he actually started the season okay. He got 6 assists in the early part of the season. He was doing really well. But then, as Dave just said, the season went on and we were all thinking we're going to improve when he comes back. But as the latter period of the season proved, he can never get fit. And he's not the player he was as a result of that. And he's meant to be the captain. He couldn't even get in the team, could he, in the final games of the season? So, yeah, I went with a 4. And in some ways, I actually hope the club's got one of those little break clauses where his third year was based on appearances or something, because he's probably on a high wage and we could probably have 2 players now for the price of him, and he's not going to get any back to his best, is he? I don't fear now.
I mean, his long-term injury and faltering comeback, meant that he really was a mere shadow of what he was the season before. I was saddened to find that he couldn't complete 90 minutes of a game successfully. And I'm just hoping that there's going to be some sort of off-season medical intervention that brings back the Johansen we all love. I mean, for me, it almost epitomised everything when I saw it after the Bristol City game. He was walking around with his family, and he got round to the South Africa stand, and he took off his shoes and gave them to somebody. I thought, well, that's sort of symbolic. He gave them to the fans. I thought it was a great thing to do, but he's then walking around in his shoes, probably feeling a lot more comfortable. But I gave him a 4 as well, for the same reasons you did. Really disappointed. And that brings us on to another contradiction. Kakay, Osman Kakay, or Kakay. Somewhat the surprise package of the season, because when the chips were down, he produced some fine performances. He was actually my man of the match for one of them. I still have doubts about his ability to close down wingers. That hasn't changed. But a better season for him until he was injured. I was really saddened about that. And for that reason, how he did, I've given him a 5. James?
I went with a 4, and I think it's just because for me he will just never be championship quality. He's kind of good for the role he fills, where he's a backup in a few positions. He gives his all for QPR, but for me, he's not really progressing as a footballer. And I have the feeling that every time I see the team sheet and it says Kakay, I do think, we're going to struggle this afternoon. So I know that's a little harsh, but it's the way it is. And again, he's one of these people now who's a decent age. He's probably the player he's going to be. Is he a good enough player for us if we're a championship team? I don't feel like he is. And in some ways, for him, I feel like if he went to a League One team, he'd probably be first choice and play 46 games. So it's 100%. Whether he'd want to do that. He's probably at a point in his career where he maybe wants to play more than at QPR. He is only ever, you feel, going to be a backup because he's not gone forward as he over the last couple of seasons.
Dave, you think the same?
Yeah, I gave him a 5. I think he done reasonably well. I agree with you about him not closing down crosses. That drives me mad when he doesn't do that. But I think he's a decent backup player. It's a bit of a travesty that he's our only right back we've got at the club, really, isn't he? Apart from the loan players. And he seems to start every season like that. Really, we need to solve that problem next season. We need to get he needs to be the backup, not the first choice. He done reasonably well. I thought he did well, under Ainsworth. He had a couple of really good games under Ainsworth towards the end of the season, and the injury was a real shame for him. He always gives his all, so I'll go with a 5 for him.
Okay, that's good. Okay, brings us around to Ethan Laird. Dave, what do you reckon about Ethan Laird?
he's an odd one. If you were doing this at the World Cup break, you're probably looking at an 8. You're thinking we've got the new Kyle Walker here, and if you're doing it now, you're like, well, who's that bloke who's been playing right back? I went 5 as well for him because it was such a mixed season. It was such a disappointment how the second half of the season went with him. You know, I got a bit fed up of seeing him sit down on the floor and ask to be taken off. That happened far too often.
Yeah.
You know, maybe he had genuine injury problems, but it was just frustrating to watch. You know, going forward, he could be very good. He was very good the first half of the season, but it really fell away. It's disappointing, and you know, he's one that may end up coming back because I can't see him ever making it at Man United. But
No.
you know, yeah, a real shame.
Dave, you've gone for a 5 for him. James, 5 for you?
Yeah, I went with a 5 because I gave Kakay a 4 and I thought Laird over the season was a little bit better than Kakay, so I went with a 5. He kind of sums up QPR season, doesn't he? Massive height and then just a big fall off.
Yeah.
Kudos to him though for like fighting his way back into those last few games because there was obviously rumours he was never going to play for the club again. He'd fallen out with Ainsworth, but he got himself back in the team. Seemed to show a bit of a better work ethic in those last few games, and seemed to be really happy at the end of the Stoke match, like jumping up and down, waving his arms about and stuff. So if he's out of contract, maybe there is a future for him here, but you think he'll get better offers than what QPR can offer him because there is a good player there.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I was really confused as to what was going on when the options came for the team sheet. It was anybody but Laird, and I thought, what's going on here? You know, and perhaps we'll never know. You know, and as Dave's sort of alluded to the fact that his heart perhaps wasn't in it. But you know, for whatever reason, he's had a mixed season, and I've gone for a 6 because of my leveling up as well. I thought he was better than some of the others. Okay, on to Jamal Lowe. He arrived in January, and he must be regarded as cover for the injured Willock. I think that's why he was brought in. As such, he did a reasonable job, although no surprise as a lone player that he didn't exactly rip up any trees. But he did manage to get 5 yellow cards. He does seem to be the sort of player that attracts yellow cards. So anyway, he had 5 yellow cards, so I've given him 5 as well. James?
I've given him a 5, but I was between a 4 and a 5 because I never really talked to him at all. He's one of the people who comes in the Premier League quality, but they seem to regress to QPR's level rather than improving us. And he looks lazy the way he has his socks rolled down. And like I said, didn't really have the impact that we would have hoped. And when you look at his points that we picked up when he was on the pitch, it was very low. We didn't, to suit his name, he didn't have an impact with us at all. I went with a 5, but could have been a 4.
Dave, do you do any favours for you?
I went with a 4 for him. Like James said, when he come in, he looked like a level above what we had. I saw he come on at Reading and was really good, and then he scored against Swansea a week later. But then he just didn't really do a lot. He's one of them players I don't really know what he is. Is he a centre forward, a winger, a number 10? He doesn't seem to be brilliant at any of them things. He's all right at all of them. I don't know. Yeah, it's just disappointing. I thought he'd be a lot better than he was. You know, the club had been after him for quite a while. They tried to sign him last August as well, so they clearly, you know, they liked him. But yeah, didn't do enough for me.
No, I agree with you there on that. Quite not really sure what he was meant to be doing. Well, that brings us on to talking about bemusement. That brings us on to Chris Martin, who was made captain, and apparently Ainsworth really likes him and wants to keep him for next season. Which brings us neatly into asking James what his ranking is.
Everyone knows I'm not his biggest fan, but I've given him a 5 because he came in and he scored 4 goals. So he's done all right in those matches. A lot of the other matches, he just chugged about the place and didn't really impact it at all, which is what we expected. And he's obviously a good professional. I think, though, the fact that he came in and was made captain and was seen as a good pro, it's more of like a slamming thing on the other players. It shows how far we'd sunk that he's seen that way compared to all the other players. I think it's more of a bad mark against them than anything good against him particularly. But like I say, you think of the Bristol City match to end the season, Wigan, other examples, he was having no impact at all. And if we sign him, I think I will lose my mind.
Quickly then on to Dave. Go on.
prepare to lose your mind. You know he's signing. I went with a 4 for him. He come in and done the job that was required of him. It's a bit of a farce that we were in a position that we needed to sign an experienced striker that you had no one at the club capable of playing up front for a few games when Dykes was out. But, it is what it is with that. He done the job we needed him to. He got that goal against Burnley. It was, a massive moment for us and has probably kept us up. He scored a couple of important goals for us, but overall, I think he's been quite poor. And, like James said, it says a lot about that dressing room that he was made captain so quickly. That doesn't reflect well on the rest of the players. And he's called a few of them out recently as well. He's done reasonably well, but I can't go higher than a 4 for him.
Yeah, okay. I feel quite good now. He's incapable of completing 90 minutes. That's the first negative I've got about him. So there's always going to be some sort of substitute having to wait there in the wardrobe, waiting for him to get tired and then bring out. So immediately we're down one substitute because of him. And he can't jump or run far enough. His dribbling is poor and his finishing is lackluster as far as I'm concerned. However, saying all that, as I said, Ainsworth seems to like him and made him the captain instead of Chair or Field, which I thought was a bit odd. I think Sam Field would be a really good captain. Anyway, he was brought in when we were desperate. And you then have to say, if I compare him with other loanees such as Hoole or Wells, is he in the same league? Not for me. No, I've gone 4 and I'm probably being generous there. Please direct all your hate mail towards me on this one. This brings us on to Paal. Dave, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, similar to Laird, really. Really good up until the World Cup break and then seems to have dropped off a bit. He's improved towards the end of the season. I went 5 for him. I was quite excited about him when he joined. I thought he started the season really well, but he's kind of dropped down to the QPR level, didn't he? I think we seem to do that to players. He's someone that you hope could improve and get better next year. I think he's a decent signing, but only a 5 really.
Yeah, he had his injury though, didn't he? And maybe coming back from that, I don't know, maybe it upset him and he couldn't get back to the match sharpness he had before. I don't know. Sorry, what was your score for him?
I said 5 for him, yeah.
5. James?
I went with a 6. I thought over the season he was all right, and again, better than some of the other defenders that we rated. For me, it was just a bit of a disappointment from what we expected. They built him up with his YouTube videos they were putting out of him, whacking him in from 30 yards and whizzing past fullbacks and stuff. But you never really saw that from him. I don't think he's got the pace that they kind of said he had. He doesn't really beat a man and get a cross in. His service is hit and miss. But over the season, he was relatively solid for us at the back. Dependable little player. It's kind of feels to me like Jake Bidwell Part 2, where he's just one of those players where he's never outstanding, but he's just always there every week playing left back for you. So that's why I gave him a 6, because he is relatively dependable in this side.
Yeah, I've also gone for a 6 because I thought he coped really well with adjusting to life abroad and with a different club. And he brought stability to that left-hand side of the defence when we desperately needed it. And after his long-term injury, he never really got back to quite the same level. Otherwise, for me, he'd be as big a success as Sam Field. So, yeah, 6 from me. Which brings us on to Taylor Richards. For me, he's still largely a great unknown. We've only seen brief glimpses of his talent on the ball as he moves between injuries. I believe we are contracted to keep him, so can only hope he produces more in 2023. I've given him a 4. James?
I didn't know if we could give a 0, so I've given him a 1. And the reason I've given him a 1 is because I gave Jeff Hendrick last season a 2. And at least Jeff Hendrick was available to play most weeks. Literally, I nearly gave him a 2 just to be generous, but then I remembered him tying his shoelaces as the play was going on around him at Rotherham, and I thought, no, he is a 1. And if anyone could tell me what he actually did in QPR shirt to get higher than a 1, then fair enough. But he didn't do anything of note for me. And I think it summed up his season when he came on for a 10-minute cameo on the opening day against Blackburn and then was out for 2 months. And then after the rest of the season, I think he did 3 games, out for a few months, 4 games, out for another few months. And they're only sub appearances. It's not as if we were putting huge demands on him. Started 1 game that we lost at Coventry, and I wouldn't have even remembered he played. I just genuinely couldn't get him higher than a 1.
Oh, God. Okay. After listening to you, I've dropped mine down to a 3. Because really, I was basing that on promise of what he's going to be in the future. And that's a bit unfair of me. I shouldn't do that. Dave, what do you put down?
Yeah, I've done a 2. Just similar to what James said. He just never fit, was he? I mean, does he exist? I don't know. I mean, you just hardly ever saw him. On the odd occasions he did play, like against Huddersfield at home as a sub, he looked quite good on the ball, very skillful, looked quite exciting. He did all right when he came on against Rotherham, but we just don't really see him that much. He'll play 10 minutes and then you won't see him for 3 months. I just find it bizarre that we're going to buy him in the summer. What are we doing? You know, you think we've got a limited budget and some of that budget's going to go on him. He doesn't look like an Ainsworth player to me. I mean, Ainsworth hasn't picked him at all. I don't know if he's been injured or just not in favour.
I think he's got the same agent as Nico Hammerleinen.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I find it bizarre. I hope he gets better and I hope he plays more next year and can fulfil his potential. But yeah, a really odd signing and just a poor season.
Okay. You just say that. You say that we're saying that we're all hoping he's got some kind of potential. One of the only matches he played towards the end of the season was against Coventry, wasn't it? And he just ran straight into their player who just nipped the ball off him and they scored. So doesn't bode well.
No. As good as Coventry are, that wasn't bright. Yeah, you're right. Another disappearing act we're going to talk about. Tyler Roberts. He was apparently brought in to share the load up front. For me, in between injuries, he's produced little of merit. I wonder why Beale ever agreed to him in the first place. I've gone 3. James?
Yeah, definitely a 3. Very frustrating player. Potentially could have got lower, but then he scored 2 against Reading, which I know it didn't impact the season, but when you think that we got a point, they could have got 3. That could have actually been a match that the whole season hinged on. But that showed the promise he has, the way he did that turn and finish. He's got so much talent, but he just comes across one of those modern day footballers who's more interested in other things than actually putting his head down, getting fit and being the footballer he can be. So frustrating. He could have been a great player, especially when he came on against Charlton in his first appearance and smashed one in the top corner. We were all thinking, what a play we've got on our hands here. And that was pretty much the grand sum of his season done there, wasn't it?
Well, let's hope for somebody's going to get something out of him because we didn't. Dave?
Yeah, I went 2. I think he's just been really, really poor. Like you say, started well against Charlton and looked always quite exciting, but he's another one of those players. What is he? Is he a forward? Is he a winger, number 10? You know, don't seem to really settle in any position. He seemed to spend most of the first half of the season trying not to get injured before the World Cup and then managing to get injured, so he missed it anyway. And then he hasn't looked interested at all since we come back. I mean, I think you're right. I didn't think of that, James. Those goals against Reading were quite big for us, weren't they? But apart from that, he's just,
it's not enough.
What annoyed me was when Critchley was saying, he doesn't feel right to play when we were in desperate need of a win, and it's like, and then he wasn't seen again all season. It's like, well, is he injured or does he just not fancy it? I don't know. Another really poor loan signing, that one. Yeah, only a 2. I think that's generous as well.
I suspect he's one of these ones who in the training ground actually does really well, but when it comes to the real matches, doesn't deliver. Anyway, let's move on there. We've just finished all of our players. That's everybody ranked who's played 5 games.
I've still got Willock. Sorry, I got one more.
Have I? Oh my God, yeah, I missed Willock. How can I have done that? The Wobblies.
Yes, you've forgotten him already.
My apologies. Apologies to you, Chris, if you're watching. Yes. Okay, go on. James, you start.
Well, he started the season as a 9, didn't he? Unplayable. Probably ended the season as a 2, so I'm giving him a 5, which is in the middle of those numbers. I think it's like the most QPR-esque fall from grace ever, hasn't it? We were preview shows early in the season comparing him to Adel Taarabt because he was literally unplayable. No one could handle him. No one could get near him on the ball. The goal against Middlesbrough that he scored. And then end of the season, he can't even get in the team. And it's just such a bizarre situation. So I ended up giving him a 5. But I feel like a QPR manager should be building a team around Chris Willock, and that's where I feel the club's going wrong as well. So,
Dave, same.
Yeah, I went with a 5 as well. I can't believe we've gone from what we were saying at the start of the season is we can't win a game without him to now he's not. We don't even think he should be in the team. I genuinely don't think he should be playing. It's unbelievable, Paul. He started the season so well. He was so exciting. The injuries have had a big impact. I mean, it shouldn't be ignored. He's had 2 hamstring injuries. He had a bad one last season, and he's had another one this year. And I don't think he trusts himself. I think that has had a big impact on him. He hasn't looked the same since he come back from that hamstring injury, and when he come back up around about November time. But he just, I don't know if he's got a move lined up this summer or something. He hasn't looked interested for a while. The only thing I can compare it to, I was thinking the other day, Eze's first season under McLaren, he started brilliantly and then was really poor second half of the season.
He was.
But he come through it. He kind of learned from those mistakes and he battled through and obviously went on to become a really good player. I'm not sure Willock's going to do the same. Willock doesn't even look as good as he did when he first arrived now. I'm sure someone will probably take a chance on him. We're not going to get nothing like the money we should have got for him a year ago, but a real disappointment. Probably sums up how the club have been the last few years, how that signing has gone.
Yeah, I think we've lost the potential there, 100%. Quite how we've lost it, I can't work this out. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I have no idea what's in his mind. I mean, we certainly know that in terms of confidence, how quickly a team can lose its confidence and become poor. We've understood that. So maybe Willock just fancied not playing in a team that was losing. I don't know. Anyway, I've gone with a 5 as well. So, okay, managers. Let's talk about Beanie Mouth. Mick Beale. It all started so brightly for Mick Beale and the club with us topping the championship in October, but it started to go downhill before even he ran away. I'm not sure he would have turned it round that much better. I've gone for a 6. I'm probably being generous there. James?
No, I went with a 7 because for his tenure, we were doing exactly what he'd been brought in to do overall. We'd obviously maybe gone a bit higher than what he was thought, but he had us 6th when he left. So I went with a 7. I actually think we, like I said on a previous show, would have thought we'd have had a bit of a better season than what we've ended up having if he'd stayed. He had the trust of the players, obviously, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe we'd have been mid-table like last season. I don't think it would have ended how it did if he had stayed. And we all will know is that when he left, we were 6th. Would we have been happy with that? Yes. So I went with a 7.
All right, Dave, same.
I went with a 6. Character-wise, you give him a 0, wouldn't you? But he did what he was brought in to do. He did improve quite a few players. We was up the top of the league. I think we were still around the playoffs when he left. I think it was only like 7th or 8th. We were still doing reasonably well. But what brings it down for me is not the manner which he left, but also a lot of the signings he insisted on making. That he said, I have to have these loan players. I have to have Richards. I have to have Roberts. They've all been absolute flops, and they've been part of what's gone wrong the second half of the season. So who knows how it would have gone? He kept raving about Jake Clark. Thought Ray was the best in the division, and just haven't really seen enough of him. Balogun as well. So who knows how it would have ended up under him? I don't think we would have finished as low, but yes, 6 really. Is it? It's a shame how it ended up there.
Well, I will give him credit. He has made me a Celtic supporter. Right, on to Critchley, Neil Critchley. He was available, and that may have been the main reason for his appointment. He had a good reputation. Whether he made the mistake of trying to continue the possession-based football out from the back, or was just overwhelmed by the continuing losses, or perhaps both, it's hard to say. Whatever the reason, though, he did offer the fillip we needed, we thought, but it just didn't last. And things went from bad to worse as far as that was concerned. So for the fact that he couldn't turn things round and keep it going the right way, I've given him a 4. Dave, what about you?
Yeah, I went 4 as well. It's disappointing because I thought he did a good job at Blackpool. And I was quite hopeful when he come in, but I just don't think the players bought into him.
Maybe.
Quite early on, he could have beat Sheffield United early on. We drew in the last minute. They equalised, didn't they? But then after that Fleetwood game, he really tore into the players, and quite rightly so, to be honest. But after that, they'd gone. They weren't playing for him after that, and it was a real shame. I do wonder what would have happened if he'd stayed. I don't think it'd have been much different. I think we probably would have just stayed up under him. So what was it worth? Maybe we should have stuck with him. I don't know. It's a difficult one, but I'm saying that with hindsight. At the time, I was saying he should go. So, but it's a difficult one. Another one. It was like so many things on QPR. He's one of those that looks really good idea on paper, and then in action, it just didn't actually work.
James, 4 for you as well.
No, I went with a 3 because he only won one match in charge of us, and that was his first game. We then never won again, so it's very hard to give him higher for me. And when you look at the graph we do with the position of our team, the big spiral out of control in the season when we were heading towards the ground was under Critchley's reign. He just couldn't get us going again. Like Dave said, he was a bit unlucky. There was a few matches where if we just hung on, the whole season could have been different. He could have still been in charge now. Fine margins in football, isn't it? But yeah, he's for one win, and a cup exit at Fleetwood as well, which was a painful afternoon. I can only give him a 3.
Fair enough. No, that's okay. That brings us round to ranking Gareth Ainsworth, and got to understand that when he arrived, we were in dire straits. Probably to get through the door, he had to fight his way past the queue with sick notes. But he had to focus on one thing only, and that was to avoid relegation. And in that respect, he succeeded. During that time, he also seems to have driven the players back out of the physiotherapy room and back onto the pitch. And we have started to see, at times, some good football. However, we've had a mix now of a superb win at Burnley, Turf Moor, and you think, well, he's turned everything around, and then we have Bristol City. So I don't know. He saved us from League One. Now he needs to save us from the doldrums of the Championship next season. I've gone with a 5. James?
I've only given him a 4 because he was just marginally better than Critchley. He won a few games, and people are using that phrase, he saved us, but we were 8 points clear of the relegation zone when he joined. We ended the season, I know it was 6 points, but it was only 1 point if Reading didn't have the points deduction whilst he was here. So arguably, he dropped us 7 points closer to the drop. Whether that's because of everything that was already going on wrong with the club, but I didn't really enjoy much of his tenure at the end of the season. And I feel like we stayed up more by luck than anything else. So I gave him a 4.
Dave?
Yeah, 4 for me as well. It's been a real disappointment for me. I love Ainsworth as a player. He's someone I really hope does well. If he gets a chance next season, I really hope it works out for him. But it's just not been good enough. Like James said, we were 8 points clear. When he come in, Reading have had a 6-point deduction since then. Wigan had a points deduction, and we've still only just stayed up. Really, it's been poor. There's been some of the home performances have been some of the worst I've ever seen. Really, really poor. The style of football's awful, to be perfectly honest. But in the end, he has kept us up. You got to give him credit for those 2 results at Burnley and Stoke, because I don't think any of us saw those coming, and he's somehow got those results to keep us up. But yeah, not very good. I didn't think he done any better than Critchley, really. Yeah, it's another one. It's a shame. I want him to do well, but yeah, it's not really worked.
Well, let's see if we've got that next season. That completes the last of our of our 3 end of season podcasts, and I hope you got something from them. You may not have agreed with our rankings, perhaps, but hopefully we explained our reasoning for awarding those various points. Please look out for our pre-season podcasts when we'll be examining how well we've done with our pre-season friendlies, and also considering the transfers in and out. It only remains for me to give my heartfelt thanks to Dave and James for joining me to record these 3 podcasts in a season that started so well. looked to be heading for disaster, but was steered by Ainsworth to safety. Thank you, lads. This has been a Hoops and Dreams QPR podcast. Thanks for watching, and come on, you R's.
We know who we are. You know who we are. We are QPR.